It was a brisk and clear November morning outside. The air was still, and only a handful of energetic sparrows broke through the silence of Sam's street. Around their song was an electric humming, anticipation. Lighting a cigarette, Sam paced toward his car. As he reversed into the street, he turned left on Swade Drive rather than his usual quicker route to the right. He felt more awake than he was used to at 6:30 and elected to drive around for a bit, primarily for the nicotine rather than the scenery. Cruising west, he turned on his iPod and exhaled a thin cloud of smoke as he selected Dark Side of the Moon from his playlist. He sometimes told himself that the aimlessness of these drives was supposed to alleviate stress and promote the formation of his life's goals. This was well-intentioned bullshit, but it did allow him to waste half an hour, a handful of cigarettes, and a couple gallons of gas with a clear conscience. As Us and Them began to climax, Sam was nearing the West End Mall. He turned into the parking lot as he had done countless other times over the past 3 months. The sprinklers in the median were turned on, and Sam caught a whiff of chlorine as a stir in the air blew a light mist at his cracked window. It was delicious, almost hopeful. There was something about the beginning of a day, not immediately upon waking, but after full consciousness had been gained and really began to shed the inactive tendencies of sleep, that Sam could not and would not ever try to put into words. It was as if he was able to truly bask in that feeling. It was a small crick-in-your-neck type of feeling that stood out for him, only this crick was welcomed and comfortable. It said this morning, "Just a little bit further, you're almost there." Quite often while laying in bed at night, he would actually anticipate that invigorating emotion which he would attach to the early hours of the next day. He could sense the truth in that sensation. He had been living as a shadow for the past 3 months, after she left, after his business died, after the decay began. It seemed like a long time ago now. Almost. He did feel almost there. The parking lot in front of the mall entrance he used was sectioned off into 15 long rows with more bushes and shrubs and small trees, crab apples and cornelian cherries mainly, than any parking lot deserved. Sam loved it. All the plant life held up in that concrete dungeon felt just ridiculous enough for him to smile big, not something he did too often once his morning nostalgia wore off. Almost there, though. After parking, he sat for a moment in the nearly vacant lot and smiled again as he thought about the first time he had come to the mall 3 months ago. It had been on a whim, another one of his exaggerated morning drives that happened to end up here, of all places. He figured it would be interesting to see who actually spent their mornings walking through the sterile passageways of a public mall. Feeling kind of silly, he got out of his car and walked toward the large entrance. For one, he viewed the mall as a place for women and teenagers, and also because it was so early, people went to coffee shops or work in the morning, not malls. The doors swung in as Sam began to second-guess himself. In front of him, the hallway went straight ahead for 30 yards or so before intersecting the main thoroughfare, and Sam walked suddenly forward. There were metal grates over the entrances to the stores on either side, and he felt like he was walking through a penitentiary if it hadn't have been for the pop music playing faintly in the background. He would have suspected classical or jazz, but instead it was the latest teenage music star coming out of stealthy speakers hidden in artificial shrubbery throughout the mall. Her wailing was torture. Not knowing exactly what to do now that he was inside the mall's quarters, Sam glanced down the main hall to his right as he neared the T in his path. There was still no sign of anyone walking as he looked over his shoulder down the other side. Both directions offered an equal chance of walkers, as he was more or less in the center of the building, so he decided to sit on a bench with his back against a kid's clothing store and wait. Now he felt stupid. A minute went by, and then another. The colorful map of the mall stood tauntingly to his left, erected with the confidence of a tombstone in front of a small fountain. If he left now, no one would have witnessed his ridiculous appearance and departure, and he was about to get up and retreat when a man walked around a corner halfway down the corridor. Sam sighed and looked across at the empty bench on the other side of the hallway. It took the man what seemed like 5 minutes to get within speaking range, and when he did, he said slowly, Mind if I join you? What can you say? There's a perfectly fine bench right over there. No? I'd rather you didn't. Sure, Sam said. Thanks. As he sat down cautiously and with what seemed like a great effort, Sam realized why it took him so long to make it to the bench in the first place. He was probably pushing 70, and Sam grimaced as the man bent down. He could almost feel the arthritic pain in this guy. You work here? There was a hint of static as he spoke. No, Sam said, not really sure what else to add. My wife loved coming here. I never saw much use in arguing. She not with you today? Passed away a couple years ago. Whoops. I'm sorry to hear that, Sam said. Not your problem. Doc says the walking does me good, and it helps to have a routine. Name's George, by the way. I'm Sam. Sam took his hand and noted the loose skin slowly lapping in on itself inside their grip. Good to know you, Sam. Not many folks come through here, really. Me and Lynn usually have the place mostly to ourselves. Nice to hear something other than the goddamn music in here. Sam chuckled. Yeah, I'm not a big fan either. Sam opened his car door and stepped out as he wondered how he'd become so dependent on these walks with George. The two were separated by 40 years and a lifetime of differences. Nonetheless, come Tuesday and Thursday mornings every week, Sam inevitably pulled into his parking spot and enjoyed an hour or so of George's company. He theorized that George, like himself, didn't have a whole lot going for him at the moment. His wife had been the last living member of his family, and if he had other friends or acquaintances, he certainly hadn't shared that information with Sam. As Sam passed Crabapple, he felt a touch of shame as he knew how he had pushed his own friends and family away over the course of a few months. The Shadows had seemed like an easier place to live. But it was changing. It had changed. He couldn't quite understand it fully, but he could feel a direction forming in his path. Some type of rebirthing process had been taking place twice a week, and like it or not, Sam was beginning to become reliant on these walks as his own healing measures. This made him want to smile, but he couldn't this time. True, he was almost there, but at the same time, he was still nowhere. Still wifeless, still jobless, still only almost there. But he did have a friend. He did have a routine, and damn it, that should be enough for now, right? George was waiting for him as he approached the doors to the mall. Shaking off his thoughts, Sam grinned and offered a small wave. Morning, George. Hi, Sam. George seemed weary. Another sleepless night, probably. Sam prepared himself for a quiet morning's walk. This would not be the first time he had watched the battle between George's will and George's body. They would not be conversing much today. Sam reached the door to open it, but George motioned for him to wait. Sam, what do you think we take a breather today? I don't think I'd last longer than a few minutes walking. Didn't sleep more than an hour. The bag kept me up again. He reached in his breast pocket to retrieve a handkerchief. Dabbing his forehead, he proffered a quick grin and added, Tell you what, let me show you the library I've told you about at the house instead. Don't know why I haven't invited you over before now anyway. I'd love to, but are you sure you're okay? You seem pretty worn out. Oh, it's nothing some coffee and conversation can't fix. Fair enough. I'll follow you then. How far? Not bad. Couple miles or so. As they passed by the sprinklers, Sam inhaled deeply. 5 minutes later, they were pulling off of the highway and onto a gravel road that Sam soon realized was George's driveway. It shot through 2 football fields worth of woods before opening up to George's one-story house. Sam pulled his car up beside George's in front of the house and saw smoke coming from the chimney as he got out of his car. Flicking his cigarette casually into the gravel, he said, Nice place. Thanks. It's good to be back here away from most people. Feels like it's more secluded than it really is, but it's good nonetheless. George began to shuffle toward the side door, beckoning for Sam to follow. Sam thought he really shouldn't be living this far away from everybody, as fragile as he was getting, but didn't say anything. "Goddamn cat," George said, half skimming, half kicking the ground in front of the house where Sam saw a stray cat dart out. They entered the amiable living room, and George indicated for Sam to go ahead into the study down the hallway to his left. George sauntered into the kitchen to put a pot of coffee on. Sam recognized the smell of pipe smoke, which had been permanently ingrained in probably every item in the house, and smiled to himself. It reminded him of his uncle's house many years ago. When he walked through the door of the study, he saw that George took pride in this room. The wall opposite the doorway was composed of a large bay window with dark wooden trim selected to match the bookshelves on the other two walls. These were filled from floor to ceiling with encyclopedias, novels, texts, and in a handful of spaces picture frames with stills of who Sam assumed had been George's wife and family. He heard the sink turn on in the kitchen while he browsed through a shelf full of masterpieces. Dickens, Dostoevsky, Fitzgerald, London, Stevenson. The leather spines went on and on. The sink cut off as he realized that it appeared as though every book was in alphabetical order. Sam grinned. "I tried to kill myself yesterday, Sam." Not exactly what he had expected to hear. Sam turned from the bookshelf, no longer smiling, to see George in the doorway looking at him. "What the hell are you talking about?" George smiled slowly and softly. It was a half-smile that never truly curved its way across all of his face, and stepped into the study. He made his way wearily to the shelf Sam had been examining, and steadied himself while reaching for a picture sitting on the shelf above Treasure Island. He handed it to Sam and began to walk to his desk in front of the window. It was an old picture of a young woman in a snow-covered yard. She was reaching out toward the camera with one arm and laughing with the rest of her body. It really was a pretty picture. You could see straight into her heart almost, and it was good. "That is my favorite picture of her." George sat down heavily behind his desk and studied Sam. Sam looked over the picture frame and said again, "Seriously, George, what's going on with you today? Do you need me to take you to the doctor? Maybe get an X-ray of your back?" Ignoring the inquiry, George asked, "Will you help me with something, Sam?" "Of course, but good. I need you to pull the trigger, and I don't need you to ask why I'm ending. You should know by now." He paused and sighed faintly. "I've been trying for some time to work up the nerve to do it, but I can never finish. I always get to that final point fully prepared and back down. For some reason, I'm ready with nothing left to live for, but just can't do the deed. My wife is dead, and I have no heir, no family, no friends, nothing. If there was someone to keep living for, I would, but that's just not the way it is. Sure, you and me have hit it off, and I've enjoyed our walks together, but we both know you've got a life ahead of you, and I've got one behind me. I go to the mall, the doctor, the grocery, and then come back here and try to work up the courage to put an end to it all. Got the note written out already right here." He nodded at the paper in his hand. "And a little something for you in the bag by the door there." Sam looked in the bag sitting underneath an antique lamp on the small table to his right. Probably a few $1,000s, it looked like. "I know you've been scraping by after your business went broke, and I also know you've gotten too reliant on your own little routine lately. You've gotten a little life back in you, but you've also gotten comfortable not doing much of anything." Sam couldn't argue with that last bit, at least. He knew damn well he couldn't lounge around much longer, mall walks and sparrows and all. He just didn't know how to get out of the rut now that he had gotten so used to it. It felt good now. He was smiling again, after all. But this was a little overboard as far as ways to jumpstart one's life went. George interrupted his thoughts. "And I know what you're thinking, Sam, that you'd get caught. That's all taken care of." George held up the handkerchief in his other hand. "All you got to do is wipe the grip with this when it's over and put the gun in my hand. The note will take care of the rest whenever someone finds me, which probably will be a while." At this, George reached into the drawer, withdrew a revolver, and placed it meaningfully on the desk in front of himself. He was preparing to go at it again from another angle when Sam stepped toward the desk and held out his hand for the note. George handed it over. Sam scanned the page for a minute, looked over George through the window where he saw the stray cat pawing at a leaf, and handed it back. Sam had a sudden thought of tubing down the rapids as a boy with his brothers in the mountain streams, and how they would float for hours, each run letting the current take them further down the river than the last. His brother would tell him that they were almost there. Almost there. Sam got frustrated when he said that. What were we almost to? We don't even know where we're going. Yeah, but in a minute we'll be somewhere new, his brother would tell him definitively. That's what makes it an adventure. He thought about those summers as he realized that he had picked up the revolver and was examining it. Sam stared at the cylinder for a moment and then pointed the gun at George. George looked curious for a split second. He opened his mouth to say something, thought better of it, and smiled instead as the gun went off. When Sam arrived home, it was overcast, and as he opened his car door, he heard a sparrow sing. He felt a pulling in his heart. And as the stray cat jumped across his lap and onto the lawn, Sam realized he had taken something from George other than his life and his money. It was permission. Permission to live. Almost there.